The first thing I noticed was that my ceiling had changed. Not in a subtle, did I leave the skylight open kind of way. More like someone had replaced my cozy studio apartment's water-stained tiles with a panoramic glass dome showcasing a sunrise over a cityscape I'd never seen before. What the actual hell? My voice sounded wrong. Higher, clearer, like someone had run it through one of those beauty filters that make you sound like a podcast host. I sat up, which was when I realized my body felt wrong too. Longer limbs, different weight distribution. My hands, these weren't my hands. The nails were perfectly manicured in a pearlescent white, not my perpetually chipped black polish. I touched my face and felt high cheekbones where mine were round, a sharp jawline instead of my softer one. Don't panic, Mira, I whispered to myself. You're just having one of those hyper-realistic dreams where you know you're dreaming. Except I wasn't. The sharp edge of the bedside table pressed painfully into my thigh as I stumbled out of bed. Pain isn't supposed to happen in dreams, right? The bedroom around me looked like it had been lifted from an architectural digest spread, minimalist, expensive, with everything in complementary shades of cream and sage green. The opposite of my cluttered apartment with its thrift store furniture and riot of colors. I stumbled to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and nearly collapsed. A stranger stared back at me from the mirror. Tall, willowy with copper-red hair cropped in a sleek bob and amber eyes. I was beautiful, but I wasn't me. This isn't happening, I said, watching the stranger's perfect lips form words I couldn't believe I was saying. This is not fucking happening. A gentle chime sounded from the bedroom. I walked back on autopilot, noticing a holographic display hovering over a sleek device on the nightstand. It read, "Good morning, Remy. You have 3 appointments today. Would you like me to prepare your usual breakfast?" Remy. That was her name then. The woman whose face I was wearing. "No," I said. Then wondered if the AI assistant would recognize my confusion. "I mean, show me my schedule first." The display expanded, revealing a day planned with military precision. 9 a.m. neural sync meeting at Theseus Corp. 1:30 p.m. lunch with Eliza. 4 p.m. therapy. Theseus Corporation. The name triggered something, a blurry memory that felt like it belonged to me, but was just out of reach. I blinked, and suddenly new information flooded my mind like a dam breaking. Theseus Corporation. Pioneers in consciousness mapping and neural architecture. I knew this because Remy worked there. No, that wasn't right. I worked there, but I was Mira, not Remy. Wasn't I? My head pounded as 2 sets of memories competed for space. Mine, Mira Chen, 29, neuroscience PhD student, perpetually broke, lived in Chicago, and hers. Remy Winters, 34, lead architect at Theseus, wealthy beyond imagination, lived in. Where the hell was I? I asked the assistant. Where am I? You are at your residence in New San Francisco, Remy, it replied pleasantly. New San Francisco? What year was it? The assistant answered. May 12, 2053. 7 years after my last memory as Mira. I sat heavily on the edge of the too-perfect bed, trying to make sense of it all. Had I somehow been transferred into someone else's body? Or was I having a psychotic break? Neither seemed particularly comforting. I decided to play along while I figured things out. I showered, trying not to look at this unfamiliar body, found clothes in a closet that automatically suggested outfits, and eventually selected a simple black jumpsuit that seemed least likely to draw attention. As I dressed, more of Remy's memories surfaced. Access codes, colleagues' names, the route to work. It was like having a second consciousness nestled alongside my own, offering helpful suggestions while remaining fundamentally separate. The apartment's AI summoned a sleek autonomous vehicle that whisked me through a city that looked like San Francisco reimagined by someone with unlimited resources and questionable taste. The Golden Gate Bridge was there, but now enclosed in a transparent shell that sparkled with embedded solar cells. Buildings twisted into impossible shapes, defying gravity and common sense. Theseus Corp occupied what had once been Treasure Island, now expanded into a corporate campus that dominated the bay. As the car approached, Remy's memories provided context. Theseus had revolutionized consciousness technology, creating ways to map, store, and theoretically transfer human minds. They'd made billions selling consciousness backups to the wealthy, insurance policies against death or dementia. But something didn't add up. If this was 2053, what had happened to the last 7 years of my life? And why was I suddenly in Remy's body? The car stopped at a security checkpoint. A guard scanned my face, Remy's face, and nodded. Morning, Dr. Winters. Big day today, huh? I smiled weakly. Huge. What the hell was happening today? As I walked through the lobby, people nodded respectfully. Remy was clearly important here. I took an elevator to the 87th floor, Remy's memories guiding me like a particularly invasive GPS. Her office was predictably impressive, a corner space with views of the bay, walls that could transform from transparent to display screens with a gesture. I sat at her desk, trying to get my bearings. Her computer unlocked at my touch, her touch, and displayed dozens of messages and files. One caught my eye, Project Echo, final phase today. I opened it and my blood went cold. Project Echo, a classified Theseus initiative to transfer consciousness between living hosts. Not just backups, not just theory, actual mind transference. The file contained technical specs, trial results, ethics waivers signed by volunteers, and test subject profiles, including one for Mira Chen. My hands shook as I opened my file. There I was, my actual face, my actual life, listed as donor 37. Status, consciousness successfully extracted. Host maintained in stasis. Transfer to recipient RW scheduled for May 11, 2053. Yesterday, the room spun. This wasn't a dream or hallucination. Theseus had somehow taken my consciousness and put it in Remy's body. But why? What had happened to me, the real me, in the 7 years between my last memory and now? And where was Remy? As if summoned by the thought, a message appeared on the screen. Hello, Mira. I imagine you're quite confused right now. Check the bottom drawer of my desk. I left something there for you. The message was signed RW. With trembling fingers, I opened the drawer. Inside was a small black device, like a smooth riverstone. When I picked it up, it projected a hologram, a woman with copper hair and amber eyes. Remy in her own body. If you're watching this, the recording said, then the transfer worked, and you're probably freaking out right now. I don't blame you. I'm sorry for the shock, but there wasn't another way. She paused, looking genuinely regretful. I needed someone whose neural pattern was compatible with mine, and you were the best match in our database. You won't remember volunteering for the consciousness mapping 7 years ago, just a research study for extra cash, you thought, but that's when we first captured your pattern. I remembered that study. $200 for a brain scan that supposedly measured cognitive architecture. I'd been behind on rent. You're wondering why, hologram Remy continued. The simple answer is that I'm dying. Brain cancer, inoperable. The complex answer. She smiled bitterly. Well, that's what you're going to find out today at the Neural Sync meeting. I wish I could be there to see their faces. The hologram flickered out as a knock came at the door. A young man poked his head in. Dr. Winters? Everyone's waiting in the conference room. I pocketed the device and stood on unsteady legs. I'll be right there. Whatever game Remy was playing, I was now a piece on her board. And I was about to find out why. The conference room fell silent when I entered. 12 people sat around a table that seemed to be made of actual wood, a statement of obscene wealth in this era. Their faces showed varying degrees of anticipation, anxiety, and in one case, poorly concealed hostility. Remy said, an older man at the head of the table. Remy's memories identified him as Julian Theseus, founder and CEO. We were beginning to worry. Sorry, I said, taking the empty seat beside him. Last-minute preparations. Julian nodded as if this made perfect sense. Understandable. Today is historic after all. He turned to the room. Shall we begin? What followed was a highly technical presentation about Project Echo, most of which went over my head despite Remy's knowledge bubbling up to assist. The gist was clear enough. Theseus had perfected consciousness transfer between living hosts. They planned to announce it next quarter after final verification, which apparently meant me. Before we proceed, Julian said, Dr. Winters will share the results of yesterday's procedure. All eyes turned to me expectantly. Thanks to Remy's message, I knew what they were waiting for, confirmation that her consciousness had been successfully transferred into another body. My body. But she'd implied something else was going on, something that would shock them. The procedure was successful, I said cautiously. The transfer is complete. Relief showed on most faces. Julian smiled broadly. Excellent. And the donor consciousness? Fully integrated, I lied, not sure what the correct answer was supposed to be. Was I meant to have erased or absorbed Mira of me? A woman halfway down the table frowned slightly. No conflict? No compartmentalization? Some initial disorientation, I admitted. But stabilizing quickly. Julian clapped his hands. Perfect. Then we're on schedule. The board meets next week, and with viable results, funding for Phase 2 is guaranteed. About Phase 2, I said, the words coming almost unbidden. I've been reviewing the protocols and I have concerns. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian's smile tightened. We've been through this, Remy. The ethical considerations. It's not about ethics, I interrupted, surprising myself. It's about sustainability. The current approach requires a constant supply of compatible donors. Which we'll have, said the hostile-looking man across from me. Remy knew him as Dr. Ellis Vega, head of recruitment. That's my department's entire purpose. Yes, but there's a fundamental flaw, I continued, drawing on Remy's knowledge like a well. Long-term neural stability requires true compatibility, not just structural but experiential. Without it, degradation begins within months. A murmur ran through the room. This was apparently news. That's not what your reports indicated, Julian said, voice dangerously soft. I falsified the reports, I said, Remy's voice coming through mine clearly now. The early test subjects all experienced catastrophic neural collapse after integration. But you were so fixated on the wealthy client list you'd cultivated that you didn't want to hear it. Julian's face flushed dark red. This is most inappropriate, Remy. It's not just inappropriate. It's criminal, I continued, carried along by Remy's righteous anger. 36 people before Mira. 36 people whose minds were extracted and whose bodies were kept in suspended animation while their consciousnesses were transferred into wealthy clients who then quickly went insane. 36 people who can never be restored. The room erupted in chaos. Julian was shouting, security was being called, and several board members were hurriedly exiting. But I wasn't done. I've sent documentation to the Federal Neural Rights Commission, I announced over the din. They're executing a warrant as we speak. As if on cue, alarms began blaring. On the screens around the room, security feeds showed federal agents entering the building. In the confusion, I slipped out. Remy's memories guided me to a private elevator that took me down to a sub-basement level not on any official plans. There, in a dimly lit corridor, I found a keypad and entered a code that Remy had embedded in her memory. A door slid open, revealing a sterile room lined with what looked like translucent coffins. Stasis chambers. Inside each, a person floated in clear fluid, seemingly asleep. I moved through the room, checking each face against the image burned into my memory, my face, Mira's face. I found her, me, in the last chamber. It was surreal, looking at myself as if from outside. I was thinner than I remembered, my black hair longer, but unmistakably me. According to the monitoring equipment, my body was alive but my brain showed minimal activity, just enough to maintain basic functions. It's something, isn't it? Said a voice behind me. Seeing yourself that way? I turned to find Julian Theseus holding something that looked distressingly like a weapon. You're not Remy, he said flatly. At least, not entirely. The integration failed just as she predicted it would. She didn't predict failure, I replied, surprising myself with my calmness. She ensured it. She designed the transfer to preserve both consciousnesses, hers and mine. Julian frowned. Why would she do that? Because she needed a witness. Someone who could testify about what you've been doing here. Someone with Mira Chen's legal identity and Remy Winters' inside knowledge. Clever, he admitted, but ultimately futile. When the authorities find your body, the real you, brain-dead but breathing, and Remy's consciousness apparently having overwhelmed yours, they'll conclude that the experiment failed tragically and that you've had a psychotic break. Except for the evidence Remy sent out last night, I said, bluffing. And the backup of my consciousness she stored externally. Julian's face darkened. You're lying. Am I? You always underestimated her, Julian. You thought she was just another brilliant mind you could use up and discard. You never understood what drove her. And what was that, he scoffed. Redemption. I touched the stasis chamber where my body floated. She developed the technology, but you perverted it. It was supposed to help people with terminal neurological conditions, not provide rich narcissists with fresh young bodies. The market determines. Save it, I snapped. The only question now is whether you'll add murder to your charges. He raised the weapon, hesitating. In that moment, the door behind him slid open and federal agents flooded the room. Later, as medics worked to prepare my original body for transport, an agent took my statement. I gave her the device Remy had left me, which indeed contained the evidence Julian had thought was a bluff. You understand this situation is unprecedented, the agent said. Legally, you're both Remy Winters and Mira Chen. The courts will have to determine your status. What about my body? I mean Mira's body. The neurologists believe your consciousness can be reintegrated if that's what you want. Or I could stay as I am. As both of us. She nodded uncomfortably. That would be your choice? I looked at my body being carefully transferred to a medical transport. 7 years gone in what felt like an instant to me. A life interrupted. But I also had Remy's memories, her knowledge, her righteous anger at what Theseus had done. What would happen to the others? I asked. The previous test subjects? Their families will be notified. If consciousness reintegration is possible. But we both knew that was a big if. Unlike me, their minds might not have been preserved intact. As the facility was secured and Theseus executives were led away in restraints, I sat alone, 2 people inhabiting one body, contemplating an impossible choice. Remy had left one final message on the device, which I played as I watched the sun set over the bay. The choice is yours, Mira, her voice said gently. I've had my life. I've made my mistakes and tried to correct them. You can return to yours, or you can continue with some version of mine, or forge something new entirely. Whatever you decide, know that the technology itself isn't evil. In the right hands, it could still help people as I originally intended. She paused, then added, I'm sorry it had to be you. But I'm not sorry we met after a fashion. Good luck. The recording ended. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 2 lives, 2 sets of memories, 2 futures diverging from this moment. I didn't know what I would choose. But for the first time since waking up in someone else's life, I felt like I had a choice at all. And maybe that was enough for now.